Hi, I'm Steve Casely from CBT Nuggets, and this nugget continues through the Prince2 themes, and this nugget is focused on the organization theme as defined in Prince2. Prince2 requires, defines, expects very formal organizational roles and responsibilities to be defined for the project, and expects these formal roles and responsibilities to be adhered to throughout the project. Prince2 has very specific, very formal expectations on the definition of the organization required to successfully deliver a project. This nugget will review the importance of defining the roles and responsibilities to ensure that all project participants are aware of their exact role they play in the project and what their responsibilities are. Next, we'll review a specific feature that Prince2 calls out, where Prince2 defines all projects are going to be delivered in a customer-supplier with a third relationship as well, with a business relationship involved with the project. And this customer-supplier relationship exists in Prince2 whether or not the customer, the business unit that the project is being done for, and the supplier, the people generating the code, are part of the same org, i.e. their paychecks are signed by the same organization, by the same boss, or if it is truly we are the customer, we are the organization buying a product from an external supplier. But the relationship between the delivery team, the supplier, and the customer, the business unit expecting the project, requiring the project, needing the project, is maintained throughout all aspects of Prince2. And in addition, we throw in this third relationship of the relationship between the customer, who are the unique or the specific business people that require the project, and their relationship to the overall organizational and business environment. And lastly, we'll spend significant time in this nugget reviewing the specific, again, and I'm going to use the word formal, organizational structure for the project team that Prince2 defines and expects to see in place on all projects. So to kick off our Prince2 organization theme, we're going to review the defined roles and responsibilities that Prince2 defines. First, it's going to identify that we need to have the executive, and this is the organizational executive. Now, how high we go in terms of the organizational executive is going to, again, depending on the nature of your organization. If you're a relatively small business, self-contained in a single location, chances are we would be going to the top of the house and expecting our president or our CEO or CXO to be directly involved with our project, because they are the people with the power and authority to make decisions on behalf of the organization. The key role and responsibility that Prince2 defines for the executive is we need them involved and we need them committed. Now, recognizing that they're executives, they're not going to have 40 hours a week, 52 weeks of the year to be focused on, to be dedicated to our project, but we do need them involved, we need them committed so they can make decisions when needed. The project is having a delivery challenge. The project needs more money. The project is having a delivery challenge and we need to get commitment from another business unit. The project is having a delivery challenge and we need, it sounds like we're a needy project, but that's why we need the senior executive involved and committed so they can make decisions, they can support the project. But recognizing that they are busy, they don't have a lot of time to spend on the project, most of the day-to-day will be delegated. Day-to-day will be delegated to the specific business area. So this is the business area. These are the senior executives. This is the business area. So this is the warehouse business area that wants the specific project. So again, we will have specific roles and responsibilities where the day-to-day activities of business requirements, business justification, That cost benefit, that business case, again, is going to be delegated to the business area. And again, we're going to define the very specific roles and responsibilities that we expect our business area to adhere to. And finally, we're going to define the very specific roles and responsibilities of the project team. We are the PMs. What are roles and responsibilities? What do our analysts do? What do our designers do? And more importantly, what is the interaction points between the team and the business area? Who are the SMEs? Who are the subject matter experts that the project team is going to go to get support to make project decisions? Who is the acceptor that's going to say, yes, this satisfies all of our business requirements? And who is the business executive to help us, again, make decisions within their power and authority, within their management tolerances to move the project forward, and then the escalation to the executive. So again, we need to have a fully defined set of roles and responsibilities so that everyone is engaged, everyone is committed, and everybody has the information they need to make decisions on an as-required basis. And the next key organizational theme or sub-theme from Prince2 is this concept that all projects are delivered with a customer-supplier relationship. And as I said in the introduction, the concept of the customer-supplier applies whether or not everybody on the project works for the same organization or whether in fact it is being delivered with an arm's length relationship. But before we get into the true customer-supplier, the nuts and bolts, the day-to-day activities of the project, let's focus a little bit on the business, and I'm going to put the word executive in there, or the business at large, because there's really two roles that the business is going to play in our project. First is we need the business executives involved for all the reasons we just discussed, that they're there to support the project and make decisions on an as-needed basis. But we also need to be aware of where this particular segment of the project, this project again is being done for the warehouse department. How does the warehouse department fit into the organization at large? Is this project being delivered exclusively for the members of the business community of the warehouse department? Or will this project cross organizational boundaries, and not only will this involve the warehouse department for 80% of the total functionality or 80% of the total requirements, but there will be 10% that's going to come out of the finance department because they have to pay for the product that's in the warehouse, and another 10% requirements is going to come from the purchasing department because they're the people who have to purchase the product that's going to be stored in the warehouse, for example. So we need to understand where our project fits into the business at large, but then specifically we need to identify who the customer, and again, Prince2 is on this term customer, but I'll often use the word business or user simply because these are the people, again, with the pain that have the requirements that the project is being done for. We need, again, a new inventory management system that's going to allow us to more effectively control the inventory in our organization. And the solution is going to be delivered by a supplier. And again, assuming that this is an IT project, this is going to be the IT department. These are the people that understand how to do analysis and how to do design and how to do development and so on. So three key terms that we need to be aware of in terms of the organization. And again, not that there's a lot to memorize, but I would expect you to memorize these three relationships or these three roles, organizational responsibilities, because you will see these terms in your Prince2 exam. And to put all of this into context, how this fits together, typically most textbooks on Prince2 will define the relationship using a Venn diagram. So whatever we did in grade 6 or grade 7 math, where we do the Venn diagram, where this circle constitutes the entire business, recognizing that there are pieces of the business, finance and purchasing and human resources, that are not directly involved with our project at all. Recognizing that we have the customer or the user area, Again, recognizing that this warehouse department may have other roles and responsibilities over and above the specific roles and responsibilities for where we're going with the project. And obviously we have our supplier with the IT department in doing work for other businesses and other projects, so we have overlap. But specifically, our project is going to be focused on the Venn diagram where these three intersect. And again, as I say, most textbooks I've seen on Prince2 represent the customer-supplier relationship using this particular Venn diagram. I would suggest that this is probably a more realistic representation of how the business customer-supplier relationship interacts, where we have the business at large, we have our specific customer, and I'm going to say that there's probably more overlap between the business and the customer than in the traditional Venn diagram. But again, this is maybe just Steve's own interpretation of these three relationships. But I find that the customer area probably has a much stronger relationship into the overall business than that, and let me bring that other diagram back again, than that other very simplistic interaction here. But again, how you draw it is really irrelevant. We're just trying to pictorially put this customer-supplier relationship together. And again, my expectation is there's probably more involvement into the business area and into other business areas. See down here, this is where we're doing that 10% for finance and that 10% for purchasing as well. So again, you're not going to be asked to draw a Venn diagram or the Steve's interpretation of the Venn diagram, but you will definitely be expected to understand the relationships between the business, the customer, and the supplier for your Prince2 exam. And our final component of the Prince2 organization theme is the formal, and I know I'm using the word formal a lot in this particular nugget, but the formal definition of the Prince2 project team structure. And again, Prince2 is, I'm going to say, adamant that this project team structure is adhered to. Now, the one thing that Prince2 recognizes, and we'll talk about this much more in a later nugget where we're going to talk about tailoring Prince2 for overall project size, is we need to recognize that all of these roles must be filled, but these roles do not necessarily need to be fulfilled by individual people. That there is some flexibility to combine and adapt these roles a little bit as we're defining a project team structure for the size and magnitude and complexity of the project that we're taking on, but we must make sure that all of these positions are filled. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time defining what these roles and responsibilities are on this particular slide, because we're going to talk about this in detail through the remainder of this particular nugget. But we recognize that we have senior management. And in the previous discussion, this is the executive. These are the senior managers who are there to support our project. And they're universal. They are organizational senior management. They don't change, but the rest of our project team structure is unique to our project. So the project board, the project manager, and the project assurance is pulled together on a project-by-project basis, and the people who fill these roles will be different for every project. The project board, we've discussed a lot already in the series, is the overall governance of the project. They approve the project, they approve the stages, and they approve the deliverables from each stage. But what or who composes the project board? We will typically have a senior member from the customer, from the senior user. And this is, again, where Prince2 will move back and forth between using the word customer and the term user. And typically when we're talking about the project team structure, the words senior user appears more often than senior customer, but recognize that we can use these interchangeably. This is a senior member from the customer, from the business unit for which the project is being done, but they're involved with the day-to-day activity. We will also have a senior executive from the business, maybe one and the same as senior overall management, but more likely this is going to be a director level within the business community that's going to be the first level escalation before we escalate to the C level in the organization. And we're going to have a senior member from the supplier organization. So a senior manager from the IT department is going to constitute the project board. So as a minimum, we need to ensure we have these 3 roles defined and populated in our project board. And then we get into project delivery itself, where we have ourselves the project manager, who are responsible for the day-to-day execution of the project. If it's a large, complex project, we may have team leaders called in to assist us as we have to manage our scope of control. And finally, we will have an independent group responsible for project assurance, doing the project audits and doing the project validation that the project is in fact achieving everything that the executive in the business and the senior user from the customer, from the business want. And typically this team structure is defined again in Prince2 textbooks using this particular format. So we have the senior manager or senior management overarching not just this particular project board, but all other project boards are going to be taking place in our organization, plus doing all of the other organizational company management that senior management is going to do. Not a lot of time, but critical to help us move the project forward. Then we have the all-important project board, report directly to the senior management, and take their orders from senior management. They are the ultimate decision point, again, within their tolerance levels for the project. And we have the senior user, senior customer, the business executive, and the senior supplier as peers within the project board. As we tailor Prince2 for large complex projects, we could add other members to the project board, but we don't want our project board to get too large, because then the project board loses its nimbleness and loses its ability to make decisions. Reporting directly to the project board, we have ourselves as the project managers, and we're responsible for the day-to-day execution and management of the project. And we may have team leaders reporting to us, again, within the scope and control of our project. And finally, off here to the side is project assurance, where we must have the independent validation that the project is delivering to the quality expectations and that the project is delivering to the expectations of the project. And finally, I've thrown another piece of the Prince2 team structure in here, not fundamental to the overall organization and management of the project, but a very critical aspect to help us, the project managers, get our job done, is we may need to enlist additional project support. And that's the format you'll typically see called out again in Prince2 textbooks. I'm going to offer, again, a Steve view of the same team structure, but organized in a fashion that Steve calls his H chart. So I'm going to take that particular definition away and bring in the Steve H chart. And my H chart is basically, here's my left-hand side of my H, here's my right-hand side of my H, and here is my crossover in the middle, joining my left and right, making the H. And I realize it's not a very good H. It's probably as poor an H as Steve's handwriting itself is, but we have the same basic structure. Steve likes the H chart only because it better separates the customer management from the supplier management. And again, this is not particularly relevant if you're going for an external relationship, because these roles are absolutely going to be segregated. But more important, I think, if it's being delivered by the internal resources, just to help people understand. So again, we have our project board, and I'm going to say my project board is, for all intents and purposes, this particular group right here, where we have our business executive, we have our senior user, and we have our senior supplier, and I've thrown an additional member of the project board in. I'm going to say this is optional, but I would typically throw in a senior executive from the supplier organization as well, to ensure that we have equal and fair representation on the project board, but again, on a purely optional basis. We have added a new role in here that's called the acceptor, and it's entirely possible that the senior user and the acceptor can be one and the same. Again, it's going to depend on how large the organization is, how many other day-to-day responsibilities that the senior user is going to have in day-to-day execution of the customer, of the business community. But often the acceptor will be a separate delegated position to ensure that there is somebody there to work day-to-day, hand in hand with the PM to ensure overall project success. And that's the other thing I like about the H chart, is it puts the acceptor and the PM on an absolute peer level. They are buddies, and I often describe this as we're arm in arm, arm over shoulder, working together to ensure project success, and we're going to have the same arm in arm working together to ensure project success between the senior user from the customer side and the senior member from the supplier side. And again, that's one of the reasons I like the particular H chart, is it at least I believe putting these lines in gives us that spirit of cooperation, of partnership. Ran out of real estate a little bit when I was drawing this. This mess here in the center is my project assurance. So again, they're independent. They aren't part of the PM team. They report directly to the customer side of the area. So if there's an arrow, the arrow is going to be reporting there, and the PM and the senior supplier is going to be monitored by the assurance. We have a team lead as required to support the PM. And again, we have that all-important project support just to remove some of the load to allow the project manager to focus on project management and to offload some of the administrative, some of the bookkeeping, some of the timekeeping functions that often go with managing large projects. So in a little more detail, let's look at all of these roles in our project team. So the first role is senior management, and I don't feel we need to spend a lot of time on senior management. I expect everybody has a pretty solid understanding of what senior management is in their organization. We all work for organizations. We all have senior managers in our organizations, and senior management are the ultimate decision makers specific for this project. But ultimately, senior management are the ultimate decision makers for our organization at large. But for the purpose of where we are in this Nugget series, they are the ultimate decision makers for the project, and they are the final point of escalation. We need them involved. We need them informed. And we need them ready for the escalation on an as-needed basis. But ideally, I'm going to inform, I'm going to involve my senior managers, but hopefully my project is going to go so well I never need to go to the point of escalation. But they're there, they're ready to help me when I need them. And as part of or consistent with being the ultimate decision makers, they are also the providers of all of the funding, which gives them the power. He or she who owns the dollars or the funding gets to make all of the decisions. Senior management, critical for overall project success. The key is to keep them involved and informed at the appropriate level so that they're ready if I need them for escalation. And then I hope I never have to escalate to them. And our next role is the project board. And again, I expect by this point in time in this Nugget series, you're very familiar with the project board and what the project board does. So I'm going to go through this very, very quickly as well. But the key point I want to make about the project board is the project board is consistent with the definition of a project, where a project is a temporary arrangement of human and other resources to achieve a unique purpose. The project board is also project specific. So the executive, the senior user, the senior supplier may never have worked together before. They typically are all part of the same organization, at least again, unless the supplier is a true third-party organization. So we all work, or typically all work for the same company, but we may never have been pulled together to work on this specific project. So there is some unique characteristics that we need to be aware of. And what does the project do, or a project board do? Again, they provide the overall direction and management of the project, again, within their levels of tolerance. So they can approve and make decisions as long as the project variances do not exceed some predefined threshold, whatever the threshold is going to be defined, and they manage the project within that. As discussed at length already, they approve the project to be initiated, and they approve each stage to proceed. They approve all of the project deliverables, and they are our point, or at least our first point, for exception escalation. And again, nothing new or wonderful about the project board that hasn't already been discussed so far in this series. But next I want to spend just a moment or two on the 3 specific key roles in our project board. And the first of these is the senior user, or again, to keep with the other terminology, the senior customer. Obviously comes from the business area. The project board is a group of peers. No one individual typically in the project board has an overall veto power to overrule the other board members. So the project board should always work on a consistency, consensus fashion. But they all have unique roles that they need to fill, and our senior user ensures that the results of the project is fit for the purpose for which the project was taken on, that it is appropriate to be used in the organization. And that would be their main role in the project, as they are, I'm going to say, the ultimate acceptor of the solution, that it is fit for the purpose for which it was undertaken. They are also the unit, the person, the individual who's going to commit the customer user resources. So if we need an independent acceptor, or we need subject matter experts, or we need people to participate in customer acceptance testing, or we need the senior user is going to be the individual who has the power and authority to commit specific others in their business unit to support the project. And consistent with our first statement, they're going to validate that the product meets the requirements. But I specifically called out fit for purpose as different than product meets requirements. Now, I hope I would never get to this point in a project where I produce results and my product absolutely meets 100% of the requirements. I did exactly everything that I was required or expected to do, and I've completed every deliverable, and my project is a success. But for some bizarre reason, those results are not fit for purpose. They can't be implemented. It's inconsistent with labor relationships. It's inconsistent with health and safety standards. It's inconsistent with the current corporate direction. For whatever reason, my project satisfied the requirements, but I'm also expecting my senior user to ensure that it's fit for purpose, and probably more importantly is again, my expectation is my product will meet the requirements. I'm expecting my senior user to ensure overall acceptance. And I don't mean acceptance of the project deliverables, I mean acceptance into the business unit. So the senior user is going to stand up in a business unit area meeting, or send out a corporate email, or however that senior user is going to correspond, and said, "Dear business users, dear everybody who works for me," in other words, this project is now done. This project is going to be used by everyone. You need to ensure that you attend training. You need to ensure that you go out of your way to learn this new system. You need to ensure that you report all of your issues and problems, all of the learning curve challenges that you have throughout this, so that we can adopt and improve and make this project work. I need you to ensure that there is acceptance into the organization. So that's the specific roles that we expect the senior user to do in our project board. And our next project board role, I want it always described as the business executive. because I do find Prince2 will move back and forth between using the word executive in terms of the senior management oversight for the project and this specific business executive who's involved in the project board. So again, this is just Steve trying to clarify what level of executive we're talking about. We're not talking about senior corporate executive. We're talking about a senior business executive. And again, to pick a title, I would suggest typically our business executive is going to be at a director level. But again, I realize different organizations using different roles and responsibilities at a organizational hierarchy differently. But again, it's going to be a senior business executive who's going to take ultimate accountability for the project. So my senior user is responsible for the insurance of the acceptance into the business area. My business executive is going to support that by taking the ultimate accountability of the project forward into the business. Effectively, they are the person who's going to be responsible for accepting of the cost benefit justification, and really they own the business case. They are the person who's going to champion the business case as needed throughout the senior management in the organization to ensure that the project gets the support, gets the commitment that it needs to be approved. And introducing a new term, well, not really a new term, because we did talk about project assurance when we were going through the organization chart, but introducing this concept of project assurance, or again, that the quality and the process is being followed. Project assurance is not the project manager's responsibility, i.e., the ownership of project assurance is not the project manager's responsibility. The project manager is responsible for ensuring that the quality and the processes are followed, but validating that the quality and processes are followed are not the project manager's responsibility. That would be policing yourself. So the business executive is going to own the project assurance on the project. So an independent assessment of how well I'm doing, the project manager is doing, in terms of quality and process is the responsibility of the business executive. And if the business executive has the skills and the time, the business executive can not just own, the business executive can do the project assurance. But again, assuming that they are an executive and they probably don't have the direct skills and certainly don't have the time, they will assign the project assurance to another project team member that we'll discuss in just a moment. But the ultimate responsibility for ensuring that the project acceptance takes place is within this business executive. And our final member of the formal project board is the senior supplier. Basically, I'm going to say my boss. The senior supplier is responsible for doing oversight for the project delivery unit, making sure that the project delivery team does everything that it is responsible to do for overall project success, i.e., that the project manager is doing anything and everything required to ensure overall project success. And just as we expected the business to commit the business resources, or the senior user to commit the business resources, our senior supplier is going to commit the delivery resources. Here's the project manager, here's the analyst, here's the designer, here's the developer, here's the everything else to ensure overall project success. So although I believe my project board is a team of 3 equals, there are 2 business equals and an IT supplier equal on the project board. So in terms of pure consensus building, the senior supplier probably has a little less power overall in the project board, but the senior supplier is there to make sure that the delivery unit, that the project team itself is doing the right things and keeping the other 2 peers, the senior user and the business executive, happy and ensuring that the project is doing what it is it's supposed to do. Now our next role, I know, doesn't need a lot of description in this particular nugget because that's what the entire nugget series is all about. What is Prince2 project management? We have many nuggets describing what Prince2 project management is. So if you want to know what the project manager does, You're going to find out by taking this series. But ultimately, the project manager is responsible for the day-to-day project execution to ensure that the project is doing everything that we've defined, that the themes, that the principles, and that the processes are being followed. The key is project managers manage, they don't do. There is a project team. We have analysts, we have designers, we have developers who do the work. Typically, unless this is an extremely small project, there's enough work managing that requires full-time dedication of the project manager as a manager, not a doer. Now, my last statement that I've made here comes directly from Prince2 process definition. Prince2 says that the project manager typically comes from the customer user organization. So in terms of getting the right answers on your Prince2 exam, recognize that Prince2 defines that the project manager comes from the customer user organization. Now, I deliberately said on the last slide where I had my senior supplier that the senior supplier is typically my boss, and I'm assuming I'm the project manager. So by that statement, and I was very conscious of when I said it, is a deviation from what Prince2 defines as a typical project organization. And it may be that the organizations I've worked for are unique, where project managers are typically part of IT. And in other organizations that I have never worked for, PMs are not part of IT, PMs are part of the business. And that's again what Prince2 is based on, the assumption that the PMs are part of the business area, part of the customer user organization. Doesn't change the role of what the PM is, it simply changes who the PM ultimately reports to in terms of the organizational hierarchy. So again, my experience is the PM typically doesn't come from the customer user organization, but again, to pass your PMP, the PM will come from the customer user organization. But again, I will reemphasize, doesn't change the expectations of what the project manager does, simply changes who the PM's senior manager or first level up the food chain is in terms of reporting. And our next role I'm also not going to spend a lot of time on, which is the team leader. The team leader is absolutely an optional role and typically is included into the project when the scope or span of control is too much for a PM. So again, using the standard rule of thumb that a single individual, a PM, can manage 7 to 10 individuals. As soon as the team grows beyond 7 to 10 individuals, we will need to bring in team leaders and start to layer our project management organization. And that's all the team leader is. It's an expansion of, it's a delegation of specific roles and responsibilities of the PM when there's simply too much structure, too much information, too much management in the project for a single individual to do. And just to wrap up the internal project structure, before we get into the project assurance role, I'm going to spend, again, just a moment on project support. Again, this is an optional role for our project. Steve says, but highly recommended. That's a Steve term, not a Prince2 term. Prince2 recognizes that project support is an often good strategy to employ into your project, but the statement of but recommended comes directly from Steve, so don't expect to see a specific question on the Prince2 exam saying, is project support recommended? No. Prince2 says project support is optional, and again, it's there to free the PM to focus on the project, and again, it says the size, the complexity, and I'm going to say the scope of control, again, grows and grows, where we're bringing in more team leaders and more team leaders to create an effective project organization, where we have team leaders or super team leaders with team leaders underneath them, finally to the team. As we start to grow the size of our project, it will make a lot of sense to bring in additional project support They're not trained project management resources, but they're there to take on the administrative activities, to do the timekeeping, to do the filing, to do the everything else, to free the PM and the team leaders to focus on project activities and not on administration. And our final and very, very, very important role on our project team is the role of project assurance. As discussed, the business executive owns. So the business executive owns project assurance, but the business executive will typically delegate or assign project assurance to another individual simply because they don't have the skills, they don't have the knowledge, and they don't have the time to do the work required to ensure effective project assurance is going on in the project. And this statement is key. Project assurance must not report to the PM. Project assurance is going to report directly to the business executive. Project assurance is going to monitor to the PM, which is why project assurance cannot report to the PM. And project assurance is going to validate the quality of the results, and project assurance is going to ensure that the processes are being followed. And I'm not going to say a lot more about project assurance in this particular nugget, because the next nugget in the series is all about the quality theme in Prince 2, and quality and project assurance are synonymous. So therefore, we're going to really dig into the details of what project assurance is in our next nugget. The key message I want to talk about here is the roles and responsibilities. Project assurance is owned by the business executive, often delegated, and must not report to the PM, and performs the audit function to ensure that the project, and therefore the PM, is delivering what it is they need to deliver. This concludes our nugget on the Prince 2 organization theme. In this nugget, we focused on the importance of defining the very specific roles and responsibilities so that we truly understand who does what, that we have the executives, or again, the senior management, involved and informed, so that they can help out the project when the project board can't make decisions based on their power and authority, and the project board is there to support the project manager and the project team when the project manager, again, doesn't have the power and authority based on exception reporting and tolerances. We also discussed this concept that all projects, according to Prince 2, are delivered in a business-supplier relationship, or a customer-supplier relationship, where the customer comes from the business and the supplier are the delivery team, and that the customer is part of the larger business organization, where the customer is a specific unit of the business or a specific subgroup of the business with the overall responsibility. And finally, we focused on an effective team structure, and Prince 2 defines a very formal team structure where we have senior management executive providing overall oversight. We have a project board with a senior user, a business executive, and a senior supplier providing the oversight to the project. And then we have the project manager doing the day-to-day delivery of the project. And finally, we have project assurance doing the oversight and the validation that the project is being delivered with the expected level of quality and following the project processes defined. This concludes our nugget on the organization theme. I hope this module has been informative for you, and thank you very much for viewing.